Crying at a grave, a poor young woman met a millionaire. "That's my wife's grave. What's your story?" A soft wind whispered through the trees, rustling the dry leaves scattered across the worn paths. It was the kind of day that seemed to hold its breath, as if the world were waiting for something to happen. Among the rows of tombstones, a young woman sat on a small, cold stone, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a bouquet of wilted flowers. Her clothes were simple and worn, patched in places where the fabric had frayed, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, catching the faint light as she bowed her head. Tears streaked her face, carving paths through the dust and dirt, and she whispered words that only she could hear, words filled with longing, regret, and sorrow. Her name was Lila, and she had come here alone, drawn by a memory too painful to carry within herself any longer. She had never known comfort in her life. Her family had been poor, and loss had been her constant companion. Yet, in this quiet place, surrounded by the stillness of the graves, she felt a strange sense of safety. She could cry without restraint, could let the raw ache of her heart spill into the open air, mingling with the soft sigh of the wind. She pressed the flowers closer to her chest, imagining that somehow, in some way, they could carry her love and her sorrow to the person she had lost. She had come here every week for months, not to mourn someone famous or rich, but someone who had meant the world to her. Each visit felt like a pilgrimage, a way to hold onto a connection that life had cruelly torn from her. Her eyes, red and swollen from countless nights of sleepless grief, scanned the grave before her, tracing the carved letters of the name with trembling fingers. Every detail of the stone seemed etched into her memory: the gentle curve of the letters, the tiny cracks along its surface, the faded flowers that had long since been replaced by new ones from strangers passing by. She whispered the name aloud, her voice breaking, though no one could hear her. As she sat there, lost in her world of grief, she did not notice the figure approaching from a distance. He walked slowly, carefully, as though afraid to disturb the silence of the cemetery. Ethan, a man in his 40s, dressed in a tailored dark suit that contrasted sharply with the soft gray of the day, paused as he neared. His presence was calm, deliberate, and yet there was a heaviness to his steps, as though he too carried an invisible burden. Ethan had walked this path many times before, though today, something in the stillness seemed different. Perhaps it was the sight of the young woman, her face streaked with tears, that drew him closer. Perhaps it was the way the wind seemed to sigh through the trees, carrying with it a feeling that this moment held significance. He stopped a few feet away from her, giving her space, but close enough to be seen. His eyes fell on the grave beside him, a grave marked with delicate flowers recently placed. His voice, quiet and steady, broke the silence. "That's my wife's grave," he said, almost as if speaking to himself. Then, almost shyly, he added, "What's your story?" Leela looked up, startled by the sound of someone's voice. She had not expected company, had not expected anyone to see her in this raw, vulnerable state. Her first instinct was to shrink back, to hide the tears that had so freely flowed for hours. But there was something in his eyes, soft, kind, and deeply human, that made it hard to retreat. They were eyes that had seen sorrow before, eyes that carried a quiet understanding, not judgment. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if she should answer. Then slowly, as though guided by some invisible thread, she nodded. She began, her voice trembling. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. Her words faltered, but he did not rush her. He simply waited, giving her the space to speak, and in that pause she found a strange courage. "My name is Leela," she finally said. I come here for someone I loved. She was very important to me." Her voice cracked and she pressed her hand to her mouth to hold back the sobs threatening to escape. "I lost her. Life has been very hard since then." Ethan nodded gently, his expression softening. He did not offer empty words or quick comfort. Instead, he leaned slightly on his cane, watching her with patient eyes, and said, "I understand. Loss, it changes everything, doesn't it?" For a moment, Leela just stared at him, surprised. Most people avoided the grief of others, turning away or offering hollow phrases meant to fix something that could not be fixed. But this man, there was something different, something genuine. His presence did not feel intrusive. It felt safe. She lowered her gaze again, staring at the grave in front of her. "Yes," she whispered, "it changes everything. Every day feels empty. Every moment like a part of me is missing. I don't know how to go on sometimes." Ethan nodded again, as if he had expected her words all along. "I know the feeling," he said softly. "I lost someone too. My wife, she was everything to me. I visit her grave often. It's the only place I can still speak to her." He paused, and then, with a faint smile, he added, "Sometimes talking helps, even if the person you're talking to isn't here anymore." Leela felt a strange warmth in his words. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, she felt as though someone understood the depth of her grief. Not in a fleeting, passing way, but in a way that resonated, that recognized the weight she carried. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, unsure how to continue, but sensing that this man, this stranger, would listen. Minutes passed in silence, filled only by the whisper of the wind and the distant chirping of birds. Slowly, the tension in Leila's shoulders began to ease. She realized she could breathe without the immediate sting of tears, if only for a moment. The simple act of being seen, truly seen, had begun to lift the heaviness from her chest. Ethan, sensing the small shift in her demeanor, gave a gentle nod. "It's hard to share," he said quietly, "but it's also the first step toward healing. You don't have to carry it alone forever." Leela glanced at him, a faint spark of hope flickering in her eyes. She did not know what the future held, or why this stranger had stopped to speak to her. But in that quiet cemetery, among the graves of those they both loved, a connection had begun to form. It was tentative, fragile, yet powerful, a bond built on shared sorrow and the simple act of listening. As the wind rustled through the leaves, carrying with it the scent of earth and life, Leela felt something she had not felt in a long time, the sense that perhaps, just perhaps, she could begin to heal. And beside her, Ethan's quiet presence reminded her that even in loss, there could be understanding, compassion, and maybe even friendship. The sky remained gray, the clouds heavy, but for the first time in a long while, Leela did not feel completely alone. She looked at the man who had interrupted her grief, and in the depths of his eyes she saw not pity, not judgment, but something infinitely more comforting: recognition, understanding, and a shared humanity. And so, on that quiet, overcast afternoon, amidst the rows of silent graves, a young woman and a wealthy man met, not as strangers, not as perfect people, but as two souls united by loss, beginning a journey neither of them had expected, but both would come to cherish in ways they could not yet imagine. After that first encounter at the cemetery, Leela found herself thinking about the man she had met more often than she expected. His calm voice, his kind eyes, and the gentle way he had listened to her story stayed with her. She wondered why he had stopped to speak to her, a poor young woman crying over someone long gone, when he had his own grief to bear. Yet, for reasons she could not explain, she felt a small sense of relief every time she thought of him. He had shown her that someone could understand her pain without judging her, and that was something she had almost forgotten existed in the world. The following week, Leela returned to the cemetery at the same time, holding another small bouquet of flowers. The air was cool and crisp, with the smell of damp earth rising from the soil after a light morning rain. She approached her usual spot with a heavy heart, expecting to sit alone and let her tears flow freely. But as she neared the grave, she saw him already there. Ethan stood a few feet away, his back straight, his hands resting gently on the top of a cane. He seemed calm, almost serene, despite the sadness that lingered in his eyes. For a moment, Leela froze. She was unsure if she should speak or quietly turn away, but he noticed her at the same time and smiled faintly, as though greeting a friend he had not yet known. "Hello, Leela," he said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding." She shook her head, a small smile breaking through her tear-streaked face. "No, not at all. I'm glad you're here." Her voice was still soft, but there was a note of comfort in it now, a faint warmth that had not been there before. Ethan nodded, turning slightly to give her space. "Would you like to sit with me for a while?" he asked. His voice was gentle, patient, and inviting, as if offering not just company but understanding. Leela hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She walked slowly toward the stone beside him and sat down. The ground beneath them was cold and damp, but the presence of another person made it feel less harsh. They sat together in silence for a while, listening to the distant cawing of birds and the rustling of leaves. There was no rush to speak, no expectation for words, just two people quietly sharing the same space and sorrow. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "You said last time that life has been very hard for you," he began. "Would you like to tell me more? Sometimes it helps to speak." Leela's heart beat quickly at his question. She had been so used to keeping her struggles to herself that the thought of sharing them with someone else, even someone kind, felt both frightening and relieving. She took a deep breath, clutching the small bouquet of flowers in her hands. "My family, we didn't have much," she began. "We struggled every day just to eat, to pay for a small room to sleep in. And then I lost them, one by one, my parents gone, my little brother gone. I don't even know how I survived some days." Her voice trembled and she paused, trying to steady her breath. Ethan listened silently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. His presence was steady, reassuring, and it gave her courage to continue. "I had dreams," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to study, to do something meaningful with my life, to make a difference, but everything seems so impossible. Life doesn't care about people like me. I feel invisible sometimes." Tears ran down her cheeks, but she no longer tried to hide them. This man, this stranger, seemed to accept her as she was, without judgment or pity. Ethan's eyes softened, filled with understanding. "You're not invisible, Leela," he said quietly. "I see you. I see your pain, your courage, and your heart. Life can be cruel, yes, but even in darkness there is light. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places." Leela looked at him, surprised at the gentleness in his words. Most people, when faced with someone else's sorrow, either looked away or offered words that felt hollow and meaningless. But Ethan, he spoke from experience, from a place that felt real. She felt a small spark of hope, the tiniest flicker of warmth in the cold emptiness she had carried for so long. For the next hour, they shared stories. Leela spoke of her childhood, of the small joys she had once known and the crushing losses she had endured. She told him about her dreams, the things she wanted to achieve despite the obstacles. And Ethan, in turn, shared pieces of his own story. He told her about his late wife, about how their lives had intertwined for so many years, and how her sudden loss had left a void he could never fully fill. He spoke not to compare grief, but to show her that pain was universal, and that even the wealthiest and strongest among them were not immune to heartbreak. Through their conversation, a bond began to form, fragile at first, but growing stronger with every shared word. Leela found herself laughing softly at a memory Ethan recounted, a rare sound she had not allowed herself to make in years. And Ethan, in turn, felt a warmth he had not felt since his wife had passed. It was a quiet, unassuming connection, built not on wealth or status, but on shared human experience. When the sky began to darken and the first drops of rain fell lightly on the ground, neither of them moved immediately. They simply sat, listening to the soft patter on the leaves, feeling the world around them shrink to just the two of them. Leela realized that she no longer felt entirely alone, that her grief, while still present, was somehow lighter in the presence of someone who understood. Ethan finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "Would you like to meet again?" he asked gently. "I mean here or somewhere else. You don't have to, but sometimes sharing a little more of our stories can make the burden easier to carry." Leela hesitated. She had always been wary of people, of getting close and then losing them. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that she could not ignore. Slowly she nodded. "Yes," she said softly, I would like that." And so they agreed to meet again the following week, at the same time, in the same quiet corner of the cemetery. It felt like the beginning of something delicate and unexpected, a friendship born from grief, a connection that promised understanding without pressure, comfort without expectation. In the days that followed, Leela found herself thinking more about Ethan than she had expected. She remembered his calm voice, the way he had looked at her without pity, and the gentle smile that had somehow made her heart feel lighter. It was strange, almost unbelievable that she could feel hope again, even just a little. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not entirely defined by loss and sorrow. When the day of their next meeting arrived, Leela dressed carefully, though modestly, choosing her best clothes, simple and clean, hoping to show that she respected this connection that had begun so unexpectedly. She arrived early, clutching another small bouquet of flowers, her heart beating with nervous anticipation. Ethan was already there, standing near his wife's grave, his posture relaxed yet dignified. He smiled warmly when he saw her approach, a simple gesture that made her feel welcome and seen. They greeted each other quietly, almost shyly, and then began to walk slowly through the rows of graves. The air was fresh with the scent of rain, and the leaves glistened with moisture. They spoke again of their lives, of challenges and memories, and this time Leela felt a growing sense of confidence. She began to see that even in a world that often seemed unfair, there were moments of kindness, of connection, that could make life bearable. By the time the sun began to dip low behind the clouds, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Leela realized that she was smiling more freely than she had in years. She felt lighter, not because her grief had disappeared, but because she had found someone who would walk beside her through it, not judging, not demanding, just walking alongside. Ethan noticed the change in her demeanor and smiled quietly to himself. He had met many people in his life, but few had left such an impression in such a short time. There was something about Leela's resilience, her honesty, and the quiet strength hidden beneath her sorrow that drew him in. He knew that their connection was rare, a meeting of hearts shaped by grief yet open to hope. As they parted that evening, Leela felt a sense of anticipation for the next meeting. She understood now that healing did not happen all at once, but through small steps, small moments of understanding and shared humanity. And Ethan, walking back to his car, felt a quiet gratitude for the chance encounter that had brought this young woman into his life, reminding him that even after profound loss, the human heart was capable of connection, kindness, and hope. Over the next few weeks, Leela and Ethan continued to meet at the cemetery, their conversations becoming more natural, more open. What had begun as a quiet understanding of shared grief began to grow into something deeper, a friendship forged in loss but strengthened by kindness, laughter, and trust. Each meeting felt like a small step away from loneliness, a gentle reminder that life, even in its harshest moments, could still hold unexpected beauty. One afternoon, after the rain had cleared and the sun had returned to paint the cemetery in soft golden light, Ethan suggested something different. "Layla," he said quietly, "would you like to go somewhere else today? Somewhere you haven't been before?" Leela blinked, slightly surprised. She had grown accustomed to the cemetery, its familiar paths offering her comfort. But there was something in his voice, a gentle encouragement that made her curious. "Where, where would we go?" she asked hesitantly. "There's a small cafe not far from here," Ethan explained. It's quiet, not fancy, but the view is lovely. We could sit, have a cup of tea or coffee, and just talk." Leela hesitated. The idea of leaving the familiar and stepping into a world she had rarely experienced felt intimidating. She had never been to such places, never imagined that she could belong there. Yet there was something reassuring about Ethan's calm presence, and a small part of her wanted to see life outside the shadow of grief. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's go." The walk to the cafe was quiet at first, the soft crunch of gravel under their feet filling the silence. Leela noticed the subtle changes in the neighborhood as they walked, the neat houses, the small gardens, the way the sunlight caught the windows. Everything seemed so different from her own world, yet not unwelcoming. Ethan noticed her glances and smiled faintly. "It's okay to notice," he said. "The world has so many small things worth seeing if we just take the time." When they arrived at the cafe, Leela was taken aback by the simplicity and charm of the place. Small tables were scattered near the windows, sunlight spilling across the polished wooden floors. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread and brewed coffee. She had never been somewhere so quiet and peaceful, a place that seemed removed from the struggles of daily life. Ethan led her to a table by the window, and they sat down together. The waitress brought them 2 cups of tea, and for a moment they simply watched the world outside, the soft sway of trees in the wind, children laughing in the distance, and people walking along the streets, each carrying their own stories. Leela felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, she could sit and breathe without the pressing weight of grief pressing down on her chest. Ethan noticed the change in her demeanor and said softly, "It's okay to enjoy small moments, Leela. Happiness doesn't have to be loud or extraordinary. Sometimes it's just sitting quietly, sharing tea with someone who cares." Leela smiled, a small, hesitant curve of her lips. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "I always thought happiness was something far away, something I couldn't reach, but this feels different." They spoke for hours that afternoon, sharing memories, dreams, and even small, everyday stories. Leela told Ethan about the little things she loved, books she had read, songs she liked, and her secret hope to one day travel, even just a little, beyond the streets she had always known. Ethan listened intently, occasionally offering small suggestions, like places she might visit or books she might enjoy. He never dominated the conversation, never made her feel small or unimportant. Instead, he made her feel seen, valued, and understood. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting warm amber light across the cafe, Ethan suggested they take a short walk. They wandered through nearby streets, passing small gardens and quiet parks. Leela noticed how different the world felt when she walked beside someone who treated her with respect and kindness. The simple act of being seen as more than her struggles filled her with an unfamiliar but welcome sense of confidence. They eventually reached a small park with a wooden bench overlooking a pond. Ducks floated lazily on the water, and the gentle ripples reflected the colors of the sky. Leela sat quietly, watching the scene, feeling a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. Ethan sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching, comfortable in silence. "Do you ever think about the future?" Ethan asked after a while, his voice soft but curious. Leela thought for a moment. "I do," she said quietly, "but it feels uncertain. I want things, dreams, but I never know if they're possible. Life has taught me to be careful with hope." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Hope can be fragile, yes, but it's also what keeps us moving forward. Even a small hope can make a difference." "You deserve to believe in your dreams, Leela, no matter how small or large they may seem." Her heart warmed at his words. There was something about Ethan's calm encouragement that made her feel capable, even in the face of a world that had often seemed cruel. She realized that their meetings had become more than just an escape from grief. They were lessons in trust, kindness, and the quiet strength of human connection. Over the next few days, Leela began to notice subtle changes in herself. She walked with a little more confidence, smiled more easily, and even started small projects she had abandoned months ago, reading books she had loved as a child, writing down memories, and even thinking about ways to improve her life. Each time she felt doubt creeping in, she remembered Ethan's quiet encouragement, his calm belief in her, and it gave her courage to continue. One afternoon, as they sat again by the cemetery, Ethan suggested another outing, this time to a small bookstore he loved. "You mentioned you like books," he said gently. "I thought you might enjoy seeing some of my favorites. You don't have to buy anything, just browse, explore, and enjoy." Leela felt a small thrill of excitement, tempered by her usual hesitations. She had never imagined herself walking into a bookstore with someone like Ethan, exploring worlds she had only dreamed of. But as they entered together, she felt a sense of belonging she had rarely known. They wandered among the shelves, discussing authors, sharing favorite passages, and laughing softly at discoveries. By the end of the day, Leela realized how much she had come to value Ethan's presence in her life. He had become more than a stranger who shared his grief. He had become a guide, a mentor, and a friend who had helped her begin to see the world in a different light. And Ethan, in turn, found that Leela's resilience, honesty, and quiet strength inspired him more than he had expected. He had learned that even after profound loss, the heart could still open, still find connection, and still experience joy, however small or fleeting it might be. One evening, as they walked back toward the cemetery after one of their outings, Leela spoke softly, almost shyly. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, "for everything, for listening, for caring, for showing me that life can be kind even in small ways." Ethan smiled gently. "It's not just me, Leila," he replied. "You've shown me too. You've reminded me that even after loss, people can heal and new connections can bring light into dark places. We help each other, and that's the beauty of it." Leela nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not known in years. The world had not changed entirely. Her struggles were still real, her grief still present. But now she understood that she did not have to face it all alone. There were moments of hope, moments of kindness, and moments like these that could make life bearable, even joyful. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Leela and Ethan paused near their usual spot. They stood together quietly, each lost in thought, yet connected by the unspoken bond that had grown between them. Leela realized that their friendship was something rare and precious, built not on wealth, status, or expectation, but on understanding, respect, and the courage to share their hearts. Ethan, noticing the soft smile on her face, felt a quiet satisfaction as well. He had not expected to find such a connection in the midst of grief, but he had. He had found someone who reminded him of the strength of the human spirit, and who showed him that even after the deepest pain, life could still hold beauty, laughter, and hope. As they parted that evening, promising to meet again soon, Leela felt a quiet excitement. She looked forward to their next encounter, not with fear or hesitation, but with anticipation. She understood now that healing was a journey, and that sometimes the people we meet along the way can change everything. And so, their bond continued to grow, each meeting another step toward understanding, trust, and the quiet joy of human connection. The cemetery had brought them together, but the world outside had offered a chance for friendship, hope, and perhaps something even more beautiful, proof that even after loss, the heart could still find light. As the weeks passed, Leela and Ethan's friendship grew stronger. Their meetings were no longer confined to the cemetery. They ventured into small outings, shared quiet meals, and sometimes simply sat together watching the world go by. Life, which had once seemed heavy and unkind to Leela, began to feel lighter in Ethan's presence. Yet, despite the growing warmth between them, both carried shadows that neither fully spoke of, shadows that threatened to complicate their connection. Leela had started to feel a small sense of hope, the kind that made her heart flutter and her mind imagine a brighter future. But with hope came fear. She worried about what people would think if they knew she spent time with a wealthy man. She feared judgment, whispers of scandal, and the sense that she was out of place in his world. Deep down, she wondered if their connection was genuine or if it was only temporary, fragile as the wings of a butterfly. Ethan, too, struggled with his own doubts. His late wife had been the center of his life for decades, and memories of her lingered in every corner of his home, every photograph on his walls. He loved Leela's company, her courage, and her honesty, but he feared the comparison she might make between herself and the woman he had lost. He wondered if he was betraying his wife's memory by allowing himself to feel this warmth again, by opening his heart to someone new. One cloudy afternoon, they met as usual near the cemetery. Leela arrived first, carrying a small notebook she had been writing in, full of thoughts, dreams, and reflections. She had wanted to share them with Ethan, but when she saw him approaching, she felt a sudden wave of insecurity. What if he did not understand? What if her words seemed silly or naive? She clutched the notebook to her chest, hesitating. Ethan approached with his usual calm demeanor, but there was a shadow in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Hello, Leela," he said softly, though his voice carried an unusual weight. "I hope you don't mind, but I need to speak with you about something important." Leela's heart skipped a beat. She nodded slowly, unsure what he meant. "Of course," she whispered. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath, looking at the ground before meeting her eyes. "Leela, I care for you," he began carefully, "more than I expected when we first met. But I worry about what this connection means. I've lost someone I love deeply, and opening my heart again, it's frightening. I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to dishonor the memory of my wife. I want you to understand where I am." Leela felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that he was honest, that he cared enough to speak his heart. Fear that their connection, fragile as it was, might not survive the weight of their realities. She opened her notebook and for the first time shared some of her deepest thoughts with him, her fears, her dreams, and the insecurities that often held her back. "I feel out of place," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm not like you. My life has been full of struggles, and I worry that people will judge me, that somehow I don't belong in your world. And yet, when I'm with you, I feel like I could belong somewhere, with someone who sees me as I am." Ethan listened, his expression softening. "Leela, it's not about wealth or status," he said gently. "It's about trust, kindness, and connection. Those are the things that matter most. The world may judge, but we cannot let it dictate how we live our hearts. I've learned that too late in life, and I don't want you to wait as long as I did to find someone who believes in you." Despite his words, tension lingered. Both knew that their relationship, as pure and caring as it had become, faced challenges. Their differences in social status, age, and life experience created an invisible wall that neither could ignore. Leela worried that people would see her as a gold digger, even though her intentions were pure. Ethan worried that he might misstep, that his feelings could unintentionally cause her pain. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet park, Leela noticed people watching them. A mother with a small child gave a polite but curious glance. A young man walking a dog whispered something to his companion. Leela's heart sank. The fear she had buried for weeks rose to the surface. "Ethan," she said softly, clutching his arm, "do people notice us? Do they think, I don't know, strange things about us?" Ethan squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Leela, I cannot control what others think," he said gently. "All I can do is be honest with you, respect you, and care for you. What people say outside doesn't define us. Our bond is ours. That is what matters." Even so, the fear lingered. Leela felt torn between the warmth of their friendship and the weight of societal judgment. She wanted to trust him completely, yet a part of her held back, afraid that something could shatter the fragile connection they had built. Then came a revelation that complicated everything further. One afternoon, Leela overheard a conversation about Ethan in a nearby cafe. Someone mentioned his late wife, her family, and the legacy of wealth he had inherited. They implied that any attention he gave a young woman like Leela was unusual, almost scandalous. Her heart sank. She felt exposed, as if the world would never allow her to step fully into this connection without judgment. When she confided in Ethan, she tried to hide her tears, but they fell freely anyway. I, I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. People will judge me. They'll say I'm here because of your wealth. They'll never understand why we are friends. Ethan shook his head, his eyes filled with quiet determination. Leela, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks, he said firmly. They do not walk in your shoes. They do not know your heart. What we share, it is real. It is honest. That is more valuable than any opinion from the outside world. Yet even as he spoke, both of them knew that outside opinions were only part of the challenge. Ethan's memories of his late wife remained a silent presence in their interactions. Sometimes, when Leela laughed or shared a story, he would catch himself comparing her to the woman he had lost. He felt guilty for moments of joy, worried that they were in some way disloyal to her memory. Leela, noticing his hesitation at times, wondered if she was overstepping, if her presence reminded him too much of what he had lost. One rainy evening, as they sat under the small roof of a park pavilion, the tension finally surfaced. Leela spoke softly, hesitant but determined. Ethan, I feel like we're walking on thin ice sometimes. I don't want to hurt you and I don't want to make things harder for either of us, but I care for you. I think about you and I don't know how to stop. Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of both sorrow and hope. Leela, I care for you too, he said quietly. More than I expected, but we must be careful. Life has already given us so much pain. I do not want to cause either of us more. They sat in silence, listening to the rain tapping softly on the roof above them. The world around them seemed distant, and yet their hearts were fully present with each other, each aware of the fragile line between connection and fear, hope and uncertainty. Over the next few days, both struggled with their feelings. Leela considered stepping back, worried that she was intruding on a life she could not fully belong to. Ethan wrestled with his emotions, torn between opening his heart fully and the memory of his late wife that still lingered like a gentle shadow over his life. Finally, one evening, Leela made a choice. She went to see Ethan at his home, a place she had hesitated to enter before. He welcomed her with the same calm warmth that had drawn her to him from the beginning. Sitting together in his study, surrounded by photographs and memories, they spoke honestly, openly, without fear. I don't want to let fear control me, Leela said softly. I want to be honest with you, to share my thoughts, my dreams, even my doubts. I care for you, Ethan. And I think you care for me too. Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. Leela, you are right. I do care for you. I care deeply. And we will face whatever challenges come together. Society, memory, fear, none of it matters if we are honest and true to ourselves. That night they both understood that their connection, while fragile, was stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. They had chosen to face the challenges together, to trust in the bond that had grown through shared grief, patience, and understanding. The journey was far from over. There would be moments of doubt, of misunderstanding, and of fear. But for the first time, both of them believed that love, friendship, and hope could exist even in the shadow of loss, that they could face the world together, and that the heart had the capacity to heal, grow, and connect in ways they had never imagined. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance between vulnerability and trust, between grief and hope. Leela and Ethan had faced their fears, spoken openly about their feelings, and confronted the invisible walls that had once threatened to separate them. Now, their connection was stronger, quieter, and deeper, built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared experiences. One morning, Leela arrived at the cemetery carrying a small bouquet of fresh flowers, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the faint scent of earth and blooming grass. The sky was a gentle shade of gray, soft enough to feel like an embrace rather than a shadow. She walked slowly toward her usual spot, noticing the familiar paths, the rows of stones, and the quiet beauty of the place that had once been a source of sorrow, but now felt like a place of reflection and connection. Ethan was already there, standing near his wife's grave, his hands folded calmly before him. When he saw her, his face broke into a warm, genuine smile that made Leela feel instantly at ease. "Good morning, Leela," he said softly, his voice carrying the same gentle strength that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. "Good morning, Ethan," she replied, returning his smile, feeling a small thrill in her chest. She approached him and placed the flowers on the grave with care. For a moment, they stood together in silence, each reflecting on their own memories, their own grief, and the journey that had brought them to this point. "I've been thinking," Leela said after a while, her voice soft but steady, "about everything, about life, about loss, and about how far we've come." Ethan nodded, his gaze still fixed on the grave. "I have too," he said quietly. "It's remarkable how life works sometimes. We meet people in the most unexpected ways and they change us without even trying. You've changed me, Leela, in ways I didn't think were possible after everything." Leela felt warmth spread through her chest. "And you've changed me too," she admitted. "You've shown me that it's possible to trust again, to hope again, even when life has been cruel. I never thought someone like you could care for someone like me, but now I know that it's real and I'm grateful for it." Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes full of quiet emotion. "It is real," he said firmly, "and it's stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than anything the world can throw at us. We've faced our shadows, our insecurities, and we're still here, together." For a long moment they stood in silence, letting the weight of their words settle. The cemetery, once a place of mourning, now felt like a sacred space of understanding, healing, and connection. Leela realized that her grief had not disappeared, nor had Ethan's, but it had transformed. It was no longer a chain that bound them to pain. It was a bridge that connected them, allowing empathy, compassion, and love to flow freely. Over the next few days, they continued to spend time together, exploring more of the world outside the cemetery. Ethan introduced Leela to quiet parks, small cafes, and local bookstores, each outing a gentle adventure that strengthened their bond. Leela began to see life through a different lens, noticing small joys she had once overlooked: a bird singing in the morning, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of children playing in the distance. One afternoon, Ethan suggested a walk along the river that flowed through the city. The water shimmered under the sunlight, reflecting the trees and sky like a mirror. Leela felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her eyes following the gentle flow of the river. Ethan smiled. "Yes, it is. And it reminds me that life moves forward no matter what happens. We can learn to flow with it, to embrace the changes, and to find joy even after loss." As they walked, they shared stories of their childhoods, dreams, and the small hopes that had carried them through difficult times. Leela spoke about her desire to learn new skills, to explore opportunities she had once thought impossible. Ethan listened, encouraging her and offering gentle guidance, never pushing, never judging, simply being present and supportive. One evening, after a quiet meal at a small cafe, they found themselves sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, and the world seemed peaceful and still. Leela leaned slightly against Ethan, feeling the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his breathing. "I feel different," she admitted softly, "like I can face life in a way I couldn't before. I've learned that it's okay to hope, to dream, and to let people in. And that's because of you, Ethan. You've given me courage when I didn't know I had any." Ethan turned to her, his expression gentle but full of emotion. "And you've given me something I thought I could never have again," he said quietly. "You've reminded me that even after loss, life can be beautiful, that connections, trust, and love can exist in the most unexpected ways. You've healed parts of me I thought would never recover." Leela felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness but of gratitude and relief. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and valued, not for her past, her struggles, or her status, but simply for who she was. Ethan's presence had become a constant source of strength, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could be softened by understanding, patience, and care. In the following weeks, their bond continued to grow stronger. Leela began to pursue her dreams with newfound determination, taking small steps toward education and self-improvement. Ethan supported her quietly, offering advice, encouragement, and gentle reassurance whenever doubts arose. They celebrated each small victory together, whether it was finishing a book, learning a new skill, or simply having a day free of grief and worry. One quiet afternoon, they returned to the cemetery, not to mourn, but to reflect and give thanks. Leela placed a small bouquet on the grave of the person she had lost, feeling a sense of closure and acceptance she had never known before. Ethan stood beside her, offering silent support. Together, they acknowledged the losses that had shaped them and the connection that had grown from shared sorrow and understanding. "You've come so far," Ethan said softly, turning to her. "I'm proud of you, Leela. And I'm proud of us for facing our fears, for trusting each other, and for finding hope again." Leela smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You've shown me that even in the darkest times, there's light to be found. And that's why I believe we can face the future together, no matter what it holds." Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. "We will," he said firmly. "Together we can face anything. Our past has shaped us, but it does not define us. The future is ours to build step by step, with patience, care, and love." From that day on, Leela and Ethan continued their journey, walking side by side through life's challenges and joys. Their connection was not perfect. It was built from two people who had experienced deep pain, who had learned to trust cautiously, and who had grown stronger through shared understanding. But it was real, honest, and unbreakable in its own quiet way. Leela found new courage to pursue her dreams, knowing that Ethan's support and belief in her were unwavering. Ethan, in turn, discovered that life could still bring joy, connection, and hope, even after profound loss. Together, they built a friendship and bond that transcended societal expectations, judgments, and fears, proving that the human heart was capable of healing, love, and resilience. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, they sat together in a quiet park, reflecting on their journey. Leela leaned against Ethan, feeling the steady warmth of his presence, and smiled. "I never thought life could feel this full," she said softly. Ethan nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "It is full," he said. "Full of challenges, full of hope, and full of unexpected blessings. And the best part is we face it together." And so, with hearts open and spirits renewed, Leela and Ethan continued forward, carrying their pasts with understanding, embracing the present with gratitude, and stepping into the future with hope. The cemetery where they had first met remained a sacred place in their hearts, a reminder of loss, love, and the extraordinary power of connection. Through shared sorrow, courage, and the quiet strength of friendship, they had discovered that even after life's darkest moments, the heart could heal, the soul could find peace, and love, unexpected, gentle, and true, could flourish where it was least expected.